Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. We're gathered together today to talk about one of my favorite decks for this year and easily the budget deck of the year. That's right, we're going to talk about goblins once again. But today we are going to talk about how to port your existing standard goblins deck from your easily drafted collection over into historic and give you a little bit of a foothold in that brand new format for many of you, as well as talk about how to grow the deck over time. But before we get into all that, what do you say we do the awkward thing and promote the channel? Allow me to take this opportunity to invite you to subscribe to the Planeswalker Stronghold for all your new player, free-to-play, budget, and midweek Magic needs. As you can see, we aren't one of these huge channels that fluctuates tons of subscribers on any given day and doesn't even notice. Around here, you matter. Just like these fine folks here, who recently subscribed to the channel and chose to make their subscription public. You see, the YouTube algorithm seems to think that budget arena content doesn't matter. And while I know I can't change that, I think we can. So click the subscribe button to support the channel, and tap the bell icon so you don't miss on an upload. And build a more efficient collection along the way. Now, what were we talking about? Oh, right. All right, so let's take a couple minutes to talk about the current version of historic meta goblins. It's basically an aggro deck, very similar in concept to what you've been playing in standard, but with some new players. And let's talk about some of those keys. One of the first ones that we need to talk about is Skirk Prospector, because in addition to this being an aggro deck, it's also a ramp deck. So this allows you to trade goblins for red mana in order to accelerate into our ultimate win condition. Similarly, Wily Goblin creates a body for 2 and creates a treasure token, again along the lines of being able to accelerate and get to our win con a little bit faster. We also have lovely cards like Goblin Matron. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a Goblin card, reveal that card, and put it to your hand, and then shuffle. And ultimately, running 1-2 copies of this is giving us additional copies of Muxus, Goblin Grandee, a Goblin Noble of all things. For 6 mana, it's a 4/4. When it enters the battlefield, reveal your top 6, put all goblin creature cards with mana value 5 or less, which is every other goblin in the deck, among them onto the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. When Muxus attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each other goblin you control. Pretty nice. So yeah, this just creates an overrun effect and a big ass unstoppable goblin. A couple other cards that I wanted to talk about is, of course, Hobgoblin Bandit Lord. Hopefully you have drafted the D&D inspired Adventures in the Forgotten Realms set to the point that you have 4 on this. If you have at least one copy of this, your Goblin Trashmaster from your new player experience does get you enough lords to get by in goblins. One of the nice additions for historic is Goblin Chieftain. It has haste, and for 3 mana you get a 2/2, and the text box, all goblin creatures you control get +1/+1 and have haste. So he's kind of a ridiculously good lord. If you have him in play when Muxus comes in, not only are you putting all of those potentially 6 goblins, theoretically at least 3 into play, but you're buffing them all so they're +1/+1 from their original stats, and they can swing that turn potentially for the win. So I do really like this card, but if you have 3-4 copies of Bandit Lord, it might not be the best place to spend your wild card at this point in time. The last thing I kind of wanted to talk about here was the Warchief, because it makes your goblins cheaper to cast, which can be very nice when you're trying to get up to Muxus. Having that 1 mana reduction can really make a difference. Casting your Goblin Matron for 1 less is sometimes the difference between 1 spell and 2 spell for the turn. Makes your Goblin Bandit Lord even better for making him a 2-drop. Just really nice, efficient cards. So let's take what we learned here and see how we can apply this to our current standard deck and what we may be able to come up with as a nice entry-level historic budget deck. Having used our standard Goblin Grinder deck as a basis, I made some additions here. I don't really think there's much in the way of overall changes, but just some additions here to make it a little bit more historic viable. The first card I want to point out is make sure you're running your copy of Fanatical Firebrand that you can get totally for free with the code Shiny Goblin Pirate. If that is news to you, you haven't watched my comprehensive codes video, and shame on you, go do that. There's lots of free stuff that you should be taking advantage of. Beyond that, we did use a common wild card for Skirk Prospector here. That's something that this deck will not run as well as it should until you have 4 copies of that. But I wouldn't invest in all of them all at once. Build your historic deck slowly over time. That way, if the meta shifts, if they reprint this card, if something comes out that is even better than this, you haven't invested wild cards in things that you will end up potentially not using. So build your historic deck slow. That format's going to be there. You don't have to be in a rush. Let's see, next up, we added a copy of Goblin Matron because that lets us tutor up whatever answer we need. In this version, I am running 4 copies of Hobgoblin Bandit Lord because I'm hoping you have them. If not, we have previously talked about how some things can be subbed out, including the Trash Master from your new player experience collection, or potentially spending a wild card on Goblin Chieftain, because that gives you 2 lords for your brawl deck instead of just 1. Next up, a card we didn't talk about and is not currently in the meta deck, although I disagree with it. Goblin Ringleader, 4 mana for a 2/2 haste, and when it comes into play, you reveal the top 4 cards of your library, put all Goblin cards revealed this way into your hand, and the rest onto the bottom of your library. So it is a great way to reload your hand after those first 3 or so turns, maybe even on turn 5 if you haven't gotten to your win con. Next up, of course, this deck just does not function without Muxus. But even if you don't draw Muxus in any given game, you still have a very nice aggro deck going on here. Muxus is another one of those cards you're going to want to build into having 4 copies eventually. But again, I recommend building your historic deck slow. I think that makes for less long-term mistakes. And things like your Ringleader give you a good shot at drawing it as an additional card, or your Goblin Matron basically functions as a second copy of Muxus, enabling you to tutor it up. Beyond that, we've got a pretty basic mana build-up here, 19 mountains, and I'm running 2 Den of the Bugbears because I have them. If you don't, 21 mountains will do just fine. And one other land I wanted to talk about, because some of you may have this, Castle Embrith. For 3 mana, you basically give all of your creatures +1/+0 until end of turn, which in this aggro, semi-overrun style deck can be very useful. If you have extra wild cards, it's not the worst thing to have a copy of. If you don't, it's probably not where you want to spend your initial wild cards. So there you go, guys. There is the entry-level historic deck for goblins. get on this, start building it. Hopefully you took the time to draft the D&D set when you had the opportunity. If not, this is probably a deck that you want to be aware of rather than trying to build, because, well, if you didn't draft that set, this is a lot of wild cards. And as a quick wrap up, on your screen is currently all the official wildcard recommendations that we have used for this budget year, including Solemn Simulacrum, Guardian Project, Collective Company, Fabled Passage, and at number 5, Muxus, the Goblin Noble, is our 5th rare wildcard recommendation. At Uncommon, we've seen Leonin Vanguard, Adeliz, and today we talked about Goblin Matron and Goblin Ringleader at number 3 and number 4. In the common slots, we have used Command Tower, Arcane Signet, Terramorphic Expanse, Soul Warden, Blooming Sands, 2 wildcards for Raging Goblins, 1 for Spell Pierce, 1 for Faceless Agent, and today at number 10, Skirk Prospector. So be sure to make good use of your wild cards. This year we had a couple of surprises in the form of Blooming Sands and Spell Pierce. Better luck next time, guys. What can I tell you? Didn't see that coming. All right, so with all that having been said, don't forget, smash the like button like Hulk would. And of course, comment and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And one last thing, myself, I'm coming to you from America, and I have noticed that about 1/3 of my viewership is coming from the US, and about 1/3 is coming from various countries. And there's about 1/3 of my viewership that is just getting lumped into other. So to let me know you got to the end of the video, throw me a comment down in there and let me know where you are watching from.